Welcome to Man in America, a voice of reason in a world gone mad. I'm your host, Seth Holehouse. My mind is still being weighed down by all the Epstein files. Not because this is information that was necessarily new to me, but I'm seeing that this information is being spread far and wide. And I really feel like what's going on right now is a massive shift. I don't think it's a tipping point where the whole system gets overthrown, but I do think that it is some sort of very significant moment in time where a lot of people are collectively waking up in this world. And when I say waking up, what does that even mean? It's such a vague term. When I say waking up, what I mean is that I think that from birth, we have been in a slumbering state. Our society has been engineered so that from birth we are not aware of what's really happening in this world, that we are asleep to a lot of the truths that are driving and controlling this world. So I think the process of waking up is the process of being able to peel back that veil, to peel back that falsehood that we were taught in school, that we were taught through Hollywood and the music industry and even from our own parents. It's to peel it back and see the wizard, the old man behind the curtain, which is the wizard. And so it's difficult because it's not just some frail old man with some knobs that is just pretending. It's a disturbing realization that as you get higher up in the power structure in this world, you have a very significant concentration of evil that gets more and more evil as you climb higher and higher up those rungs of power. And if there's one thing that the Epstein documents have shown the world, it's that evil. Whether it's the documents talking about eating the entrails of a young child, or the rape, or the child kind of birthing factories in Zorro Ranch, or any number of things, the torture, it's showing a lot of people that there are very powerful and very evil people in this world. And so my guest today is a woman named Max Lowen, and she's someone that a year ago, it would have been maybe even a little bit controversial to have an interview like this, because the information and the topics that we'll be discussing are very, I guess controversial is the word to use. Max was born into a family that trafficked her and was involved in a lot of satanic circles, I guess to put it lightly. From a very young age, she was being groomed to grow up within this society. She was, as she'll explain, she'll give a little bit of her backstory. She was trafficked very heavily in the Vatican tunnel network, which she'll describe. She witnessed an untold amount of sacrifice, child sacrifice, human sacrifice, cannibalism, hunting parties, the things that maybe you've heard of in your kind of late night rabbit hole deep dives into this stuff. But she lived it. And so I think that in light of this information that has now come out in these Epstein files, I think it's time that we start listening to people like Max and let her tell her story of what she saw and what she lived through. Because I think that it's no longer just some crazy conspiracy. Now, for me and for probably you, maybe it hasn't been either for quite some time, but for a lot of people it was. But I think it's now time to start having these conversations because people need to start seeing this system for what it is. And so Max is going to just describe what she saw from her position in the system. Now, I will give you a warning that obviously this discussion with Max is going to be one that touches on topics that for anyone with a conscience or a soul, you'll probably find difficult and disturbing. She doesn't go into gory details of things, but she does talk about what she saw and what she experienced, and it's very, very evil stuff. Actually, it's far worse than what you see in the Epstein files, unfortunately. So there's a little disclaimer. If you've got kids around, this isn't a good episode for them. And if you're someone that has a hard time with these issues, maybe you want to just read the transcript instead or something. But I think that, again, now's the time to face these topics with a very sober and rational perspective. And so that's what we're doing today. That's what we're doing. Now, I will tell you that we do end at a place of hope, right? As I always try to do, is I try to kind of look at the darkness together, but then figure out how we're going to beat the darkness, why the darkness is losing. And she actually has some different ideas and some concepts that she talks about that really helped to open my mind up to what's happening. And it's interesting actually how she will talk about, as you'll see in the interview, that there's this dark pyramid of control of these interdimensional elite evil entities that are controlling everything below. Something has happened at that level, at the very high levels of control. Something very significant has happened, which she'll be going into in the second half of the interview. So I'm not going to say I hope you enjoy this interview because it's dark, but I hope that you take something away from it. I hope that you are impacted from this information in a way that can motivate you to do something. And I hope that you can share this with somebody. Maybe not your whole church email list, but maybe there's someone that needs to hear this information. So I think that, as Max will highlight, it's important for us to get this information out to more and more people. And that's why I'm doing this interview. Now, before we get started, just a quick note, if you're watching on Rumble, thank you for supporting a free speech platform. This show won't be published on YouTube. Maybe I'll put some clips on YouTube, but as we talk about big pharma and the vaccines and all the stuff that YouTube doesn't really like you talking about. So that's one thing. Thank you for watching on Rumble. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit the thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And also just remind you that every show that I do is done as a podcast as well. So if you want to listen instead of watch, you can go check out Man in America on any podcast app that you're currently using. So let's jump into the interview now with Max. Max, it is such a pleasure to have you here with us today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to have this interview and especially talk about these kinds of topics. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I'm always glad to expose these things. We need to really understand what's going on and who runs our planet so we can do something about it.
I couldn't agree more. And I'd probably say that I've been studying this stuff much more seriously for the past decade or so. I think my wife first told me about Epstein in 2000. It was before we were married, back in 2009 or something. It was when it first kind of crossed over my plate. And it's, you mentioned kind of exposing kind of who's actually running things. And I guess that's been the question that has really always been eating away at me, of wanting to figure out, okay, who controls this and who controls this? And I've found that so many of those paths end up leading into very dark places where it's not just wealthy businessmen that want more power and more money. It's actually very evil things. And in the past, when we talked about these things, whether I was talking about it on a show or privately, these topics weren't easy for a lot of people. And they're very easy to write off as being, oh, that's just too wild and too crazy. But with especially these recent Epstein documents that have come out, which are talking about cannibalism of babies or any number of things, I think a lot more people that I'm seeing are having these moments of, holy crap, that stuff is actually real. And so I guess maybe I'll let you, do you want to introduce a little bit of your background and kind of your story? Because I think it really helps us to frame this discussion that we're going to be having today.
Yeah, okay, sure. So, Epstein is the tip of the iceberg. He's one not even very high level broker of children. He wouldn't have been responsible for trafficking them. That would have been the CIA and all of their affiliates. Where I was trafficked and put through satanic rituals and tortured is in the Vatican, and a Jesuit facility that's under the ground in Rome. So the Jesuits, for example, are a much bigger operation of child trafficking and, harvesting of children than, for example, someone like Epstein. I mean, it goes it goes much deeper. You know, the Vatican is a major institution. So I, through a family member, was taken to the facility. Now, such facilities they're kind of like military, medical type facilities, and they exist everywhere in the world under the ground. There's many in the US, they're everywhere. And this one in particular was Jesuit. The Jesuits are probably the number one experts on mind control, trauma-based mind control, and experimentation on humans, and the darkest, most vile and evil, I call them creatures on the planet. So I don't know if people are aware of that. The Vatican, the subterranean levels of the Vatican, like way, way, way under the ground, were connected to this facility by a kind of like a train. So I would be in the facility, I would be put through different experiments, various forms of torture, things like electric shock, extreme temperatures, like being put in a freezer, you know, all kinds of bodily harm. I don't know if you can say the R word, if it would be censored, but
No, you can speak pretty
okay,
open. I'll make sure I give
okay,
people an appropriate warning beforehand. Yeah.
okay. So, you know, rapes, being kept in cages and isolation, being starved, being forced to make impossible choices, like I had to decide whether one person got killed or a different one got killed. And if I wouldn't choose, then they would both be killed. Um, Being put through just extreme, you know, being buried alive, waterboarded. If you can imagine it as a form of torture, they did it to me and many other children. Um, I I was forced to watch the torture and horrifically brutal, slow murder of animals, other people. Um, and I was also taken to that subterranean level of the Vatican. They have an altar there and they sacrifice children. So first they brutalize them so that the adrenaline is secreted in the blood. And then in a ceremonial fashion with a special knife, they cut them open while they're alive. The blood is collected in these chalices, it's drunk. There would be people in attendance that you would consider VIPs of everything religious, actors and actresses, corporate CEOs, you know, anyone, any kind of who's who in the zoo type people. And they would do these rituals in homage to Lucifer. So they are Luciferian in the Vatican. If you begin to look, you'll see a lot of satanic symbology there. And so apart from that, I was trafficked out of the Vatican to different people, you know, who would take me for different lengths of time. And then there were a lot of rituals. Many of them were in private mansions, castles, sometimes outside, sometimes inside. So there would be like black tie balls, kind of Eyes Wide Shut style, except in that movie, they didn't show the children. So a lot of children will be brought. Sometimes you're all dressed up. And these people choose, they have their preferred age or gender or race of child. And sometimes in the outdoor parties, they're hunting parties. So we're supposed to run and hide, and then they have a lot of fun hunting the kids. Some children are expendable, so they can be killed, because part of these parties, what they love to do is torture to death children or rape them to death. So this is part of it. And then others are, if you're being trained, if you're being used for different purposes, like I was, then you're not expendable, so you don't get killed. At the end of these parties, they always bring out platters with cooked human babies to eat. They eat human flesh, they drink human blood. There would be a lot of drugs and alcohol, and they're very sadistic. I don't know how to emphasize that enough. They derive extreme pleasure in forms of torture that are unbelievable and unimaginable to most human beings. You know, so that's kind of the experiences that I had. I was also, I wasn't what they call a breeder, which is being shared in the Epstein files, but I was impregnated a few times as a teenager. So this occurred from birth to age 18, on and off. And then they waited till I was almost at term, and then took the baby out and sacrificially killed it. They In these underground facilities, they do have young women whose sole existence is to be captive and to be breeding babies for them to use in these rituals, the expendable ones. Also, the Jesuits are very, they actually do something different here where they breed babies. So they'll create embryos in a dish, and they will enhance these embryos with abilities, physical prowess, intelligence, etc. They will implant them into the captive women, and then they will also begin the mind control training in utero. So they will begin to abuse the baby in the womb. When the child is born, the mother is actually sacrificed in front of the baby to leave that impression. And then they will raise these children and train them to be things like super soldiers, spies. They train them in many languages and physical abilities, or to be like what's called beta sex kittens, so sex slaves. I was trained in that. See, the pedophiles don't want children who are screaming and crying. So children are actually trained to service these adults in whatever ways they want, in the most perverse ways you can imagine. I was also trained in a photographic and audiographic memory, because part of that is blackmail. It's hearing things, it's sharing the information. So with the Jesuits, I wasn't bred in a lab or anything, but I know that to be the case. And what they do is they use what it's called trauma-based mind control. So if they, and then there's trauma bonding. So the perpetrator abuses the child, then is the parental figure and loves the child. And so it's like the Stockholm syndrome that I think the entire planet has with these people that run our planet. But it's to create dissociation. So you create, if with trauma, there's shock, and then you can be programmed. So they will create alters in people, program them for very specific things, like say to be a spy or whatever. And then later, with a certain trigger word or a sound or a phrase or something, that person goes into that altar and then executes said task for them. But then because they have different alters, don't remember. So that's particularly good, like with spies. All of these lone wolves that assassinate people, they're MK Ultra. They're being set up to precisely kill this or that person. It's a very complicated, deep web. But unfortunately, I was on and off brought to the facility, brought to these rituals, trafficked to these people. I survived. I got out. I came to the US when I was 18. I changed my name completely to sort of distance myself from the family. And I ended up getting undergraduate and 2 graduate degrees in psychology. I worked with trauma I used to work in the prison systems and in the inner cities and whatnot. Eventually, I did a deep, deep healing. So the more horrific memories that some of them had been began to come up. So I did my healing work. I became a mother, and this time my child wasn't taken from me and murdered. That was one of the best things in my life. It really helped me to learn, to love. And so slowly it was not easy, but I sort of came back from that. And then many years after that, I was angry. I was saying to God, like, WTF, God, like these children are still, suffering. And what I kind of heard back is, well, then do something, So I started to share my story. And, there's actually a lot of us where we've been coming out of the woodwork, sharing our stories. And then now the Epstein files have come out. We've been saying this for years. No one, is really listening. But I'm pleased to see that now it's finally emerged into the public consciousness. And this is important because, and we can talk about this more, but yeah, the people that run the world is not structured the way we're told at all.
Gosh, I've got so many questions and just responses to that, what you just told me, that I want to try to be intentional, because it's really unsettling. I mean, and these are things that I've gone down this rabbit hole many times and come across this information. And it's difficult. They talk about the dark night of the soul, right? And when you just have that realization of like, oh my gosh, this is real. But I can't even begin to fathom how someone went through the things that you went through and you come out on the other side with this mission to help people. I know people that, maybe they had some sort of abuse that happened at a young age and they're still, struggling so much with it. Or maybe they saw something at war, and now it's like they have lifelong PTSD. But the fact that, I mean, you didn't just see death, right? It's not like you were, living in a place, a war zone, and it was common to see a dead body or, a bomb that had blown up or something, and, see body parts, which is already horrific. It's like what you saw, it had gone from horrific to just pure evil, right? As if you were just staring into the eyes of demons, which is probably part of what was going on. And gosh, I mean, thank you for being able to tell your story, so calmly like this. I'm sure it's taken a lot of work to even talk about these things, but I just think I'm at a loss of words to even try to process the very beginning part of what it would take to get past that level of evil and trauma.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for saying that, because it's much easier now, but it's really hard to talk about it. At first, when I was giving interviews and sharing my story, I would have to, after the interview, like peel my clothes off because I was wet from sweating. I would have nightmares. There's an internal backlash because they program you to make sure that you're never going to tell. And so when I was telling my therapist about things, the suicide programming they put in me activated. And it was so powerful, it would I would actually go to the train station and stand on the platform, and it would say, jump, jump, jump. And I knew it wasn't me, it was a program in me. So I was able to resist it. But every time I do something that puts me out in the spotlight, there's always been a huge internal backlash. It's programmed into us just to ensure, we don't speak out. So I've really had to push through that. It's much easier now.
So I turned 40 this year, and just a few years ago, I just didn't have the energy I used to. Same workouts, same diet, but I felt like I was just moving through mud. Nobody tells you this stuff. One day you're crushing it, and the next day you're wondering why everything's twice as hard. Here's the thing. Most men start losing testosterone at around age 30. It's about 1% every year. But it's not just about making testosterone. Your body produces it, but a protein called SHBG locks most of it up so you can't actually use it. It's like having money in the bank, but your debit card doesn't work. So that's why I started taking Mars Men. It's designed to help free testosterone that's locked up so your body can actually access it. There's no synthetics, no needles, just 8 natural, clinically dosed ingredients. It actually smells kind of good, oddly enough. It's made in the USA. It's third-party tested. For me, stronger workouts, better recovery, and a steadier energy throughout the day. Not jittery like coffee, just drive. I feel better in 2026 than I have in years. And they have a 90-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk. And over 91% of users report higher energy levels, so check out the reviews for yourself. For a limited time, Man America listeners get 50% off for life, plus free shipping and 3 free gifts at mengotomars.com. So again, that website is mengotomars.com. So head over there now and get 50% off plus 3 free gifts at checkout. After you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. So please support the show and tell them that I sent you.
So I appreciate you acknowledging that. Sometimes I get people saying, oh, well, you're too composed. You must not, you must be lying. It's like, well, if I were a hot mess, I wouldn't be credible then. We have to learn how to say it in a way that, it's not easy though. And the other thing I'll address that you said is, a lot of children don't survive. It's too brutal. So the ones of us that do, it's that old adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's actually true. So you become sort of superhuman because you have to survive, right? And I always compare it to something more normal, which is like back in the day, communist China and the Soviet Union, when they sent athletes to the Olympics, these kids would be like a cut above, like it's because they were brutally trained at very young ages. And so that's the way the human is. If it doesn't completely destroy you or annihilate you, you have to rise to that occasion, right? So that's an explanation of how. So yes, I am extremely strong because I had to be, or else I wouldn't be here.
That makes sense to me. I have so many questions, which I'm trying to again sort through these. I've read and researched so much on this, but I feel like that now, I'm talking to someone that was inside the system, so it's no longer just reading a book on this stuff, or it's actually. So there's all these questions that I have, and I'll do my best to work through them in a rational manner. You mentioned that how we think the world works is nothing like how it really works. And this is something that I've spent a lot of time trying to understand. Is like, okay, is it then, the Committee of 300, which oversees these organizations, and what's above that and what's above that? And I know that, especially what we see now through the Epstein information, is that it's apparent that the control mechanisms at that level are these types of things, right? Blackmail and bribery and everything. But who would you say is controlling this stuff, and how does that control work? That's different different than what we perceive.
Yeah. Well, that saying "all the world's a stage" is actually literally true. The hierarchy, if you view it as a pyramid, then the bottom layer is us, it's humanity, and we're holding up this power structure. The layer right above us are presidents, heads of states, prime ministers, politicians. They're actually actors purely. They don't actually have much power in terms of the rest of the hierarchy. They're the face front to us. And then we're told, oh, there's this choice, the left or the right. They're all working for the same overlords. There's actually these people behind the scenes are all partying together and raping children together. So that's a false thing, but it's designed to keep us divided and fighting each other, and add in gender and race and everything else, so that we won't notice that, the people above that are abusing us and harvesting us. So that's just something important to know, that that's all a show. I call it like the former president, I say it was Blue Donkey Productions starring Joe Biden, and now it's Red Elephant Productions starring Donald Trump. Now, a lot of people are going to get mad about that because the Savior program is so strong. It's another program. It's a mind control program for us to keep us passive, to keep us doing nothing and waiting for someone to come save us, whether it's a politician or a Pleiadian in a spaceship or Jesus, who was a real person, existed, but is not. No one's coming to save us. That's actually, I think, our own growth point here is evolving out of being slaves, and accepting that passively, like we have been as a human race. And it's a lot of it isn't our fault because we've been mind controlled into believing things are, so we're ignorant of how everything works. So then after that layer, that bottom layer that faces us, you have all these other layers, and it includes things like you mentioned, like the Committee of 300 and militaries and generals and the CIA, and so all the intelligence agencies. And then you go a little higher and you get entities like the Vatican, the Freemasons, the Illuminati. They all work together, but they're sort of sub-factions. The entire world is basically run by a satanic cult. They're psychopaths, they're pedophiles, they're parasitic. So they harvest us physically, etherically, spiritually. And so at the tippy top of the pyramid, and this is going to sound, we're already in crazy land for some people with what's released in Epstein. So I'll just go there, but they're not human. Okay. So these are interdimensional beings that have come to this planet, that have taken it over, and they are dark. They are evil. And so they are patriarchal. So they have created everything in that image. And then the whole hierarchy is completely compartmentalized. So different rungs have different tasks and things that they do, and they have different amounts of the big picture. And right below that tippy top, and still above all the things like the Vatican and the Freemasons or whatever, are covens, believe it or not. So practitioners of black magic, that's a big part of the control structure. So that ask me more questions, but that's basically the hierarchy. So every institution that we have on this planet, everything has been either created or infiltrated by this cult. So that's why no one's getting arrested, because they control the military and the police and the justice system. And so, for example, the medical system, we used to have, real healing like herbs and energetic healing. And then the Rockefellers, which are one of the bloodline families, that's a layer in that hierarchy as well. They created the allopathic medical system deliberately to slow poison us and slow kill us, profit off that process, and then shorten our lifespan and kill us prematurely. So that entire system, this is hard for the human to grok because we've been taught to trust these people. We look at them as like our parental figures, benevolent, and they're not. They're actually, as a good example, the medical and pharmaceutical system are designed to harm us by its inherent design, see? So, then everyone knows the food is toxic, the water is fluoridated, they spray us with chemtrails. Like these people, they worship Lucifer, they worship dark demonic entities. They are a death cult. They also need us because they're parasitic. They have been cut off from the creator, God, whatever you call that, the oneness. And because they're cut off from the life force. Their highest achievement is ego, right? Which is why they're into power and fame and wealth and all those worldly things. So they, like many movies and TV shows, are revealing the truth. We're their batteries, like Morpheus says to Neo in the Matrix, right? So they need us They particularly like to prey on babies and children because of their purity, their essence. They're a soul. They've just come in from God into a human body, so that energy is very rich to them, and they harvest it etherically, and then they harvest it physically in the form of blood and flesh eating as well, right? So they paradoxically hate us. They consider us cattle. And they want to depopulate us, but to a point, they have to keep some of us because we're their energy, their fuel source, if you will. And we're also co-creators with God, but they can't create anything. They can only piggyback off existing creation. So what they do is they get us to create this, now that we see it clearly, hell on earth reality. Now, how do they do that? They use trauma-based mind control. So the same things they did to me, they do to the collective. Wars, funded and planned by these people on both sides, are not organic. Poverty and scarcity, completely engineered. This planet is abundant for all of us, right? All the false flags like 9/11 and the COVID pandemic and everything, it causes constant trauma and stress in the human collective. The human collective dissociates. They program you with their mind control, just same way they did to individuals, they do to the collective. And they've gotten us to then do their actual dirty work and create the reality that we now live in as a collective. And even on a very physical level, someone is flying those planes that are spraying us with the chemtrails, okay? Someone is injecting little children with toxic vaccines, okay? Some teacher is sexualizing your child in kindergarten and teaching them how to masturbate because the UNESCO said this is the new curriculum. See, someone is going to another country to kill people and blow up their villages. So I hope that makes sense. Like, that's kind of I mean, I know that's a lot, but I'll stop here and let you ask more questions.
Unfortunately, it makes perfect sense. And that's the thing with this whole process of awakening, is that I think it's, you go through this part, or this, I can speak of my own experience, or people I've talked to over the years, that of, gosh, well, that doesn't make sense, or why would they do that? Why would that politician do that? Why would big pharma do that? Why is the media lying about this? Why are they covering up? Even this thing goes, yesterday I was talking to my mom. My mom's like, gosh, everything on the news is about Guthrie's missing mother. She's like, why doesn't it make any sense? I said, Mom, it makes perfect sense, because it's just a distraction from the Epstein files, right? And that's the thing, is that I think if a person is able to objectively view what you've presented and say, okay, let's imagine the world did exist like that they did have that kind of control. They were evil people. They were sacrificing children. They were doing this. You look around, it's like, oh my gosh, the entire world finally makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. That's why they're spraying in the air. That's why the foods are full of poison. That's why the medicine's killing us. That's why the kids are being indoctrinated. That's why they're teaching sexuality to toddlers. That's why they're protecting pedophiles in the court system. It's like everything makes sense all of a sudden. But that's the problem, is that a lot of people can't handle that. And that's why I think that I'm so glad that you can be a voice in this, and I'm trying to do what I can as well. It's like, okay, how can I help people that are just seeing this stuff, kind of hold their hand and just say, it's going to be okay, right? It's going to be all right. Don't let it swallow you up, because it's, for a lot of people, when they come to understand this stuff, your worldview breaks. The program that you've had since birth of this is how the world works, that entire thing breaks. And that's not easy for a lot of people to deal with.
Well, it has to break because it was false. And not knowing the truth is not going to protect you. Matter of fact, quite the contrary, right? So that's the really hard part. Everything has to shatter. Your false reality, the programming, basically, the mind control, it has to do that, so that you can then begin to become who you really are. So the good news is these people are parasitic. Remember that. It's like we're the sun. We have our organic warmth and life source and light, and they don't. They're like the moon. It's a reflection of our light. So we are inherently much more powerful than these people. We are many more than these people. And the whole way they've run this show is through secrecy and deception. And when that starts to go away, that's a huge chunk of their power over us. See, we've all been mind controlled into this. Think about this idea of authority. Mark Passio has some good work, and he says a belief in authority is a belief in slavery. And I fully agree with that. So we're taught from birth that, they're the experts and we have to obey this. It starts with you have to obey your teacher. And then, at this point, the medical system is extremely predatory. Like they cannot let you leave a hospital if they want. Like we're obeying laws that these psychopaths are making that are harmful to us. So it's this obedience. And so people feel like they have no power and they have to do what they're told, whatever. Even during the COVID time, it was insane. You have to stand here. You can't, do this. You have to get jabbed to protect other people. But then simultaneously, if you're not jabbed, you're gonna infect people. So it's like, wait, but I thought if they got jabbed, they were protected, right? Like the whole thing was so insane, but people complied. That was actually, they always do these psyops for many reasons. So in that one was the jab. It was experimental, and they always experiment on us like lab rats. And they inserted synthetic DNA, they inserted nanotechnology. They wanted to kind of, it was a great experiment for them. And it also depopulated a lot, killed a lot of people. They also did it to gauge our level of compliance. How mind controlled are people? What will they be willing to do? They'd be willing to shut down their livelihood, which incidentally, it was another time when they redistributed our wealth upwards to them because their big corporates gained trillions of dollars because they remained open, but the regular people's businesses were shut down. And unfortunately, there was a lot of compliance there. But without that, what could they do? So they rely on us feeling powerless, dependent, complying, consenting. And by the way, for universal law, they have to get our consent for everything they're doing because this is a free will planet. So the creator has given us free will, which they manipulate heavily. So if they get us to do all these things, well, we've consented, we've complied. Therefore, out of free will choice, we have chosen this hell on earth reality. Of course, they're lying and manipulating and mind controlling us into consenting, but nevertheless, it is consent. But see, without our consent, they can't do anything. And sometimes they say they're going to do something and people rise up and say no, and then they back down, right? They can't do it without our compliance, without our consent, and without us being their boots on the ground. Okay, Bill Gates is not going to fly that plane that's spraying us with chemtrails. Okay, these people aren't going to go do these things. They need us to do them. So we have the power there. We have the spiritual power because we're connected to the Creator, and we're actually organic humans with a spiritual connection. We have a soul. So these people, by the way, a lot of them no longer have a soul. They've sold it. We are the ones who do everything that happens. If we know the truth, if we withdraw our compliance and consent and participation, and now that the secrets and the deception is coming to light, I feel their days are numbered.
I agree. And actually, I want to bring up this book, which we talked briefly about before we got started. This is it's Political Ponerology. And as I had mentioned before we started recording, this is a book written by a guy named Andrew Lobaczewski. He was a Polish psychologist, and he wrote the book in the 60s while living under communist rule in Poland. And it's so ponerology is the study of evil, right? That kind of like virology is the study of viruses. Ponerology is the study of evil. It's a very clinical approach to looking at it. And what he talks about in here is that, and the reason why it's called political ponerology is that what he found was that, and I've heard this in other books too, there's another book called People with a Lie, talks about this similarly, that roughly, it seems like roughly around 4% of the population, almost you could say, is soulless, or at least they're missing a lot of the faculties that make us human. Like literally just don't have compassion. They don't have empathy. These are the people that you hear stories about. They're the ones that are torturing animals as a young kid, right? They don't feel any remorse for that. They can hurt another individual. And it's very difficult for us to even comprehend that way of life. I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old both little girls. And if I flicked my 2-year-old in the forehead and she started crying, which I wouldn't do, I would feel horrible. Like off of something so simple, like, again, I wouldn't do that. But if for some reason I felt kind of being silly and I did that, and I'd feel so bad inside of me. Yet there's people that can do much worse, as we've talked about, and not actually, it's not just they don't feel bad about it, but they get off on it. They enjoy it. They suck the energy out of it. And so I want to hear your perspective on this, because basically what he's saying is that these people that are these psychopaths, they're pathological, they want power over us. And because they won't play by our rules, it's easier for them to get ahead. They can, if you have a competitor, a business competitor, hey, kill them in a car accident. Okay, done, right? If you want this, do that. If you want, so they will do whatever it takes to get to the top. And over time, the point that he makes is that they do end up getting to the top. And once they get to the top, they only promote their people. So it makes sense how over the thousands of years that this system that is currently ruling our world has kind of gained its control and structures, that they keep promoting themselves, and eventually they get to a point where they rule everything. And that's so what he refers to it as being a pathocracy. And what happens eventually, when you have the evil that has a quicker route to power, it accumulates power, it brings in more of its own evil people, that eventually you reach a point of kind of this peak saturation of evil, whether it's within a country or a society or the entire world. And that he refers to that as a pathocracy. But then he also talks about what ends up kind of collapsing it is that they're promoting based upon evil, not based upon merit or skill. So you have more and more unskilled people in these positions of power, but also then eventually, once enough common people see the evil for what it is, the evil loses its ability to hide itself. And that's what ends up being the end of the evil, which we can get into that. But I just want to see, it's one thing for me to read about it in a book. It's a different thing for you to have lived and seen this stuff. So what are your thoughts on that?
So I think he's right, but what he's missing is that the entire global system is set up to be psychopathic. So you cannot get ahead unless you are a psychopath. It's from the top down. So yes, some humans are born psychopathic, others are made that way, through trauma or whatever. But the system will only allow psychopaths. That's, I think, a little piece that he's missing, right? So as an example, anyone who gets into any power position on the planet, like a head of state, for example, has to go through a ritual where they rape and sacrifice a child. You do not get into any high position of global or governmental or corporate power unless you join that club. You have to pledge to Satan. You have to do this. And then, of course, it's filmed and it's blackmail. So even if people kind of wanted to do good, they've already been initiated into that evil. And then if they ever want to say something, there's the blackmail, So that's, for example, one of the roles that Jeffrey Epstein had. And there are many other Jeffrey Epsteins on the planet whose job it is to have material on these people to keep them under control. So the very system itself is psychopathic. Of course, it rewards psychopaths then conversely, they will, the CIA, the NSA, all these agencies, all these intelligence agencies, by the way, all work together. They're not like Mossad is no different than CIA. They're not separate and competing. They are always watching. So, for example, these very 3D video games that kids play, and there's a lot of murder and shooting or whatever. They have a back door to all technology, everything. Okay. And so they'll watch, and if they see a particular child whose tendencies are psychopathic, like they like the killing, or they even through something like a video game, they'll recruit that person. Okay. My good friend Kathy O'Brien, who's a MK Ultra survivor, her father was a pedophile and began in her when she was an infant, and he was doing child pornography. He sent at the time, he sent that pornographic material through the mail, and he got caught. He was offered immunity and money if he sold her into the MK Ultra Monarch program. That's what they do. They find you. If you're already deviant, psychopathic, sadistic, whatever, a pedophile, then they recruit you. See, does that make sense?
Unfortunately, yes. Again, it does make sense. And so you mentioned Epstein and how earlier you said he was tip of the iceberg, and you've mentioned there's multiples of him, and that's one thing that I also want to just touch on with this, is because I think that there's a lot of people that are saying, look, like almost as if Epstein represents the entire system. Like, see, look how demonic this system is. And even I'm seeing, say, Russian leaders or Chinese leaders saying, look how evil the West is. They're using it. But like I've studied, China as an example, the CCP runs the world's largest organ harvesting operation. Right? They eat babies over there. It's this stuff is easy to find access to. The KGB, which, you can't forget that Putin was a high-level KGB agent before. The KGB, in the 70s, they were pioneering a lot of the pedophilia blackmail in their KGB operations. And so I think that that's also one thing just to kind of be wary of, is that this doesn't mean that the West is satanic and gone to hell and that these other governments are going to come in and save us, because that's also, I think, part of the plan. I also think there's a lot of people that are saying, oh, look, see, Epstein is Israel. And yeah, I agree. Israel's another one of the basically all nations that has its hands in a lot of very dark stuff. But I think that's also part of the kind of plan, is to have everyone blame something else on the level that's right around here or maybe one rung up. Everyone focuses on that as being the enemy, instead of actually looking at this for what it really is, which is a satanic death cult controlling all world leaders, all countries, all industries to enslave the population.
Yeah, that you're absolutely right. China and Russia are as implicated in this as any other country. Okay, this is not. In fact, these people that run everything, they are beyond countries. Okay, countries were also a sort of an experiment. So China was an experiment in communism. Let's see what we can do if we really oppress people. They have the social credit system. They have to obey. It's a much harsher governance system. So that model worked really well. So they've actually been wanting to import that everywhere else lately.
Do you owe back taxes, or maybe even have unfiled tax returns? Or have you filed every year, but you still keep owing? Did you retire and suddenly get hit with a tax bill you didn't expect? Or are you a business owner with messy books and a balance you can't afford? Or maybe you pulled money from your 401k or IRA early, and now the IRS wants its share. However your tax issue started, the outcome is the same. Your balance isn't going down, penalties grow, interest compounds, and many of you are about to owe again for the upcoming tax year with still no plan in place. Stop what you're doing and call Tax Network USA. The IRS isn't waiting. The IRS is enforcing collections through wage garnishments, bank levies, and property seizures. They can even file without your consent. So this is where Tax Network USA comes in. With over 15 years in business, there hasn't been a tax case they haven't seen or resolved. They specialize in tax controversies and help taxpayers nationwide get back on track by resolving back taxes and unfiled returns once and for all. Whether you owe tens of thousands of dollars or tens of millions, their team has resolved over $1 billion in tax debt. They can do the same for you, but you have to call now. So they're offering a free investigation call with the IRS. After that investigation, they put a clear case plan in place to resolve your tax problem and get you back on track. This is about using your legal rights to take control before the government sets the terms for you. So do not wait for another IRS letter or a frozen bank account. Call 1-800-958-1000. That's 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/MIA or click the link in the description below.
There's communism. So those two countries were communism. Then, there's democracy, which gives you the illusion of freedom. But believe me, it's still all very controlled. But one of the agendas, so the big overall agenda that they've wanted to herd everyone into now is the one world government, one world religion, global sort of state with a global currency, a global religion, a global everything. And so they've been systematically, so in the Hunger Games, they show this reality. The world was now going to be territories, like a North America, Mexico, and then Europe already formed into the EU years, decades ago. And that's part of the globalization, right? So this is all orchestrated from above. These people are above nations and countries, and they're all different experiments. So the US, for example, as an experiment, is the country where the food and the water is the most toxic, and it's starting to come out now. In Europe, for example, there's a ton of dyes and pesticides in food that are banned there that are allowed here. So it's like, oh, let's see what happens if we poison their bodies. And then the work day, like people in Europe get 6 weeks minimum vacation a year. We're lucky if we get 2 here, right? There's no healthcare system here. You go bankrupt for medical care. You have to pay for it. University is hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. It's free in many European countries, for example, right? So it's just a different experiment. Well, let's see how this affects the population versus how this affects the population. But no, all these people I'm telling you, they're part of the same club. There's no good guys among that level of people. There are good people in the lower rungs of everything. There are good people in the lower levels of religions, of media, of medicine. People go in because they want to help. There's good police at the lower levels, but it's cult controlled. So at a certain point, you're going to hit the ceiling of where they own you and control. And so at the higher echelons of everything, every country, it's this cult.
It makes sense. And looking at the prevalence of child sacrifice, these things that you're talking about earlier, am I correct in understanding, again, how to make sense of it, right? Because I guess if you're open-minded enough, then you can make sense of a lot of these things. Like, oh, that makes sense, right? They're this kind of a creature. And so when they're going through that process of sacrificing a child and torturing and then sacrificing, or hunting and then sacrifice, whatever they can do to really build that adrenaline, which I imagine running, through the black woods in Europe, being hunted, will do that to you, right? Obviously, there's the kind of the adrenochrome aspect of it, which, from what I've heard, it's more powerful than heroin. It keeps you young. There's all that. But I would imagine that, as I think you allude to, that it's actually much deeper than that. And that actually there is an energy that's harvested in that process, almost like harvesting the energy of a soul. Kind of like you see in these Hollywood movies, the bad guy will pick someone up and he'll suck their soul out of their mouth into his body and he'll become young again, right? It's kind of like that. But is it that? But is it also that they use these ceremonies and these demonic things as ways of communicating with these interdimensional beings and communicating with these demons or with Lucifer? Is that also a big part of why they do these things?
Yes, communicating with them, feeding them with these energies. opening portals, bringing these entities into this realm as well. And even in some of these rituals, I've seen them, these people that they will willingly choose to have a demonic entity enter their vessel and take over. Okay, so that explains also their barbaric cruelty and ability to do things that, most people couldn't even do the baseline things they do, much less, So yes, all of the above.
And did you ever experience or witness anything like that was very supernatural in that process, where you saw that this wasn't just them pretending and kind of doing these things like some high school girls playing with a Ouija board, that this was real? This was real.
Yes, I did. Underneath the Vatican, uh, I actually saw entities. They weren't really corporeal, but you could see a sort of a smokiness with very red eyes. Um, I could feel them. The room gets really, really cold. It's a kind of a cold that you can't even describe as cold. It's something else. It's supernatural cold, right? Um, I've seen, I've seen this kind of thing, yes, repeatedly.
And so when you come to the conclusion, for someone like me or a lot of people that are watching or listening, you go through this journey of awakening, and at first maybe thinking whether it was 9/11 or COVID or whatever it was, like, hey, something's not right there. You start looking at it and peeling it back and peeling it back, and eventually you come to a similar place as to what our conversation is that, wow, there's actually a small group of people that are very evil, right, that have a lot of control over this world, right, to kind of really simplify it. It can be overwhelming to think, well, what can I do? Like, what am I going to go use the social media that they own, that they run, and try to like bring them down? I mean, it feels like you're an ant trying to bring down a lion. Now, obviously, if you had a billion ants, they could destroy a lion, right? And that's helpful to remember that. But you mentioned before, you alluded to a belief that you have that this system is crumbling, this system of evil. And while there's one perspective, which I kind of fully have tried to grok, as you used the word earlier, not from Elon Musk, but from Stranger in a Strange Land, great book. As I tried to kind of understand this concept, it's like, okay, maybe one thing is that they want people to see the evil. They want people to feel like the leaders are worthless. They want this collapse of structure and collapse of anything that holds together our society, so they can bring in a digital system to rule us with, right? So there's one concern there. But if you're talking about that you see the system as collapsing, it's not just the system at this level below that you think is collapsing. I'm guessing it's actually the system way up high.
Yeah.
Help us understand why you think it's collapsing and why there's hope for the average good-natured human being that has a soul.
Yeah. Well, again, everything they've done is deception, right? It's black magic. It's fooling us. It's mind control. So another biggie is the whole climate change BS, right? These people have had weather technology since the 50s, maybe. So all weather events on the planet are deliberately orchestrated. Well, people are starting to know that. When the fires happened in LA, I saw immediately people like, oh, well, those were started, by lasers, by dew. People are now waking up. They're not, it's pretty instant. So that's one factor. A lot of people woke up during the COVID pandemic. So what I'm seeing is that as they escalate their efforts to control and pump out fear and chaos, because that's their playbook, the Hegelian dialectic. You create a problem, you anticipate and stoke the fear response, and then you write in with your solution. So a lot of this chaos is to herd us into this one world government, transhuman, right? but it's failing because it's almost like every time they do a thing, it's blowing up in their face and actually waking more and more people up. So I think that's kind of funny. So now, as a result of the COVID thing, many parents are not taking their kids for their childhood vaccinations anymore. I see that out there. I never thought I'd see people wake up to that system, that evil system. Um, so they're trying really hard. It's almost like they're a little bit behind the eight ball and they're like, oh, we got to hurry up and get it done. And they're making a lot of mistakes. And it's like if God has a sense of humor, it's like everything they do is actually waking more people up. They have been trying to decimate the food supply. So first, over decades, they moved from people growing their own food and whatever into food being controlled by them corporately, water being controlled by them. And then, they went and they're killing all the cattle and the chickens and you're not allowed in this state to grow your own food in your garden. They're trying so hard. And what's happening is people are finding they're going to farms, they're going to farmers market, they're growing their own food. They're sexualizing children in the school system. All of a sudden, people are plucking their children out of that school system and finding alternative ways because that system is not designed to help your child learn anything. It's designed to mind control. I mean, we all know that. So I see that. I see every effort they're doing backfiring and causing more awakening. Secondly, I think that I don't think the top layer of the pyramid is here anymore. So I think the middle management is running the planet. And since they always compartmentalized in the hierarchy. So no one had the full plan. So these people they're making a lot of mistakes. And as things don't go well and they lose more and more control, they're now infighting each other. So different cult factions. These are psychopathic, egoic, power-hungry people. Now they're vying for who's the top dog amongst themselves. I suspect the Epstein file release is about that. It's about them kind of infighting each other. I don't think it was a benevolent thing. I think so that's where I see them losing the plot. As our consciousness rises, as people realize more and more that we've been tricked, that it's all a big fake show, that's where they lose their control and their power. George Bush Sr., who's one of the most evil of these people, along with Hillary Clinton, he said a long time ago, if people only knew what we were really doing, they would lynch us in the street. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone being lynched in the street, but they know it. They're scared of our awareness, of our consciousness. If we, each of us, take that opportunity, that shattering of your paradigm, of your reality, to do it's traumatizing, do your trauma work, heal yourself, restore your nervous system. They have attacked our nervous system like crazy because they know what a weapon fear is. Why is everything fear? It's a virus boogeyman. It's a terrorism boogeyman. It's this, it's that, because it actually causes your prefrontal cortex, your thinking rational brain, to shut down. Because in a real situation of danger, you default to your reptilian brain. You react, fight or flight. You can't think. It takes too many seconds. But they constantly pump fear to keep us reactive. And then, of course, they give the solution. So if you withdraw that and you regulate your nervous system and you heal your trauma, now you're not going to be easily controlled anymore. Then you start to learn the truth. You start to see through all the lies. That's another layer, right? They can't do anything unless we do it for them or allow them to do it to us. Okay, we actually have the power here. So what can we do? Well, to start, don't buy their corporate products. Go back to creating small businesses that they tried to destroy during COVID, and buy from each other. Start to grow your own food. Trade with people. If you have chickens and they have tomatoes, don't all they own all the corporations. Don't buy their products. If it's the Hollywood people, don't watch their movies. Start to do take your kids out of their public school system. Do not, for God's sake, use any of their pharmaceutical products. They're all designed to hurt you. What if no one bought anything from Big Pharma? Those psychopaths would go right down in a hot second. Okay. So we can withdraw from what I call the matrix. Just withdraw. Start to figure out how to work for yourself if you work for one of their corporations. We start to live with each other, share with each other, care for each other, like what happens during an unnatural disaster. People come together, they help other people who have lost their homes, they give them clothing, they give them shelter. Like, we are so much more than we think we are, right? Start reading books, start listening to people who have survived these things, like myself and many others. Start to use your brain. We're very creative. They're not, but we are. I say we withdraw from their constructed reality and we co-create one that works for us and all life. It's really that simple.
No, I mean, I have to agree with you on that because I've seen it in my own life in that, during the early years of COVID, my wife and I were living much more isolated out in the country, preparing and kind of went really overboard with prepping and we were quite lonely. And then when you're alone like that, you feel isolated and it's not a healthy place, but we've since moved and we've now got this huge homeschooling community. And we just had a beautiful Valentine's cookie exchange with our homeschool group. And we had probably 30 kids running all over our property. And I feel like as evil as the world is, I've somehow managed to create this, I don't call it a bubble, but it's like, it's a separate reality actually, where there's beauty and there's wonder and there's innocence. And it's powerful actually. It really helps to cope with this. And one thing, as I know we'll probably have to wrap up soon here, but and we'll have to hopefully do this again because I've got so many more questions. But one thing that you alluded to, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about this, is that you mentioned that the kind of the top level of that pyramid or that control structure is not there anymore, and this is the first time I've heard that, and I've came to a similar conclusion of like from the bottom up and seeing that when I look at a lot of the events happening in the world, whether it's what happened with Venezuela or what's happening with Ukraine, whatever, I see it as, oh yeah, there's a handful of these bigger factions kind of battling out, right? They all want America destroyed. They don't want America to kind of stand strong, but they all want control. And so they're kind of fighting each other. And I agree that I think that the Epstein files probably were part of that actually. But that you would only really have that happen if either A, it was intentional and the people that were above that, those entities or whatever it is, like, okay, now you're going to all fight each other, or B, if there's some sort of shift and that group is no longer there. And it's really, then it's kind of like, okay, the inmates are running the asylum now and they're going to be fighting each other. So when you say that top level is not there anymore, I'm guessing it's not because of some sort of assassination or something. I mean, if they're evil, as you've talked about, I feel like there's something divine that would have had to have happened to eliminate that part of the power structure.
Yes. This has been a war. Okay. We've been living in a spiritual war. And there's many, many factors. So that war is fought on many levels, including here on the ground where we are. So that's one factor. Another factor is as human consciousness rises, it's all a frequency. We're all energy, right? So there's a guy, David Hawkins, who has a chart and it shows all these different emotions and their frequency. These creatures have kept us in survival frequencies because that's where they can exist and control us. But as we rise in consciousness, doing our inner work and unplugging from their system, the level of consciousness frequency is too high for those evil creatures at the top, exactly, to continue to exist. They can only exist in that lower rung which is why they work so hard to keep us there, right? Then on top of it, there are some events that have occurred in the world in astrologically. So there's many people who have talked about it. There's this Russian guy that I looked at they killed him, but I looked at his website. He's Nikolai Levchov. And he talks about the night of the Svarog and the day of the Svarog. So it's cycles of darkness and light. And the cult has known that we're entering a cycle of light astrologically. So that also elevates consciousness. That's why they've been running to get the thing done before that potential. It's like a tidal wave that we can ride on and it takes us further, right? I mean, some people won't get on that wave. They'll stay down. But so there's a confluence of factors, mainly, there's too much light now for them to exist. So think about that in the simplest of forms. If you're in a dark room and you even strike a match, the light eliminates the dark. So the more light we have, and you get more frequency, more consciousness, more light when you're more healed, and when you're not, when you're less poisoned. So you try and eat the best food possible and meditate and be in nature, because again, the electromagnetic frequency fence they've developed with all this technology around us, it's very destructive. It keeps our frequency in like a ceiling. So go out in nature, literally hug a tree, put your feet in the earth, get back into the natural frequency, laugh, dance. I've seen videos of people who will go on a subway with a violin or a guitar, and then they'll start playing music and everyone will start singing. That's a frequency change from everyone like this to people together, singing a song. That's human. That's joy. You can feel it, right? When I'm even sharing it with you, it's different. Well, those people at the top, they can't exist in that frequency. So once we get collectively to a certain frequency, they won't be able to run us anymore. They won't be able to even live with us. So there's no use in fighting their system or reforming their system, because it's doing exactly what it was designed to do. Okay? It's ignoring them. It's unplugging from them and doing our own thing. That's going to be the way forward, because they need us, but we don't need them. We don't need them. And we don't want them. And another thing I'll say, okay, now that this information is out there, what I'm hoping is that people don't do the thing where they look away or they're overwhelmed and they're apathetic and they just keep on doing their normal life as if they haven't found out that children are being raped and sacrificed and eaten, okay? These creatures, these people should not be able to leave their home, go to dinner, go to an airport, go to their job, be out in society freely anymore. They should not. So I'm not advocating violence, but I'm saying they live everywhere. If if Bill Gates leaves his house, swarm his car, if they're shopping, shout at them, say, you baby eating pedophile, how dare you? These people should not. What I hope to see is that, okay, maybe they're not going to be arrested and prosecuted because these people own these systems. They're not going to arrest themselves. But we can, I'm not going to say shame them because they don't feel shame, but you know what I mean? They should feel that. They should feel that every day of their lives. Somebody sent me a thing that Marina Abramovich
weapons in the theater when I'm there.
Yeah.
I was actually just getting ready to cue that up because I just discovered this yesterday. Actually, I'll play it real quickly. It's only about 40 seconds.
Yeah, play it.
I didn't mean to actually play it yet. But yeah, so anyway, this is Marina Abramovich, which most people watching this show are probably familiar with. If you're not, I guess go look her up. She's someone that has very openly displayed a lot of satanic stuff, a lot of very strange things, spirit cooking, etc. But anyway, I'll play this 48-second clip because
play it.
As soon as you started talking about this is what came to mind.
And this problem is that I have started having bodyguards because I had the opera Seven Deaths of Maria Callas in Carré Theatre in Amsterdam, and I lived there for 30 years. I had to be bodyguard every single day to go to theatre and back, because there was announcement, the alarm that there will be people in the weapons in the theatre when I'm there.
Because of the Alex Jones stuff?
All of this, yeah. Then, when I was leaving the last day of performance, there was enormous, beautiful made from fresh roses, the heart in the front of theatre. And I was thinking this was for me, finishing the work. And they said, no, this is a protest for the children you just eat. Honestly, it's not fun at all. And I am just horrified by this. But
Gosh, I'll say one thing quickly.
The nerve of her to say that. She should, horrified? They should never feel safe in this world again.
Well, what's interesting is, I'll mute it, but just kind of looking at, like, her, if you look at her body language, her stuttering and stammering as she's speaking, she's showing behavior that you would see in someone who's scared. Right? This is not someone who is this untouchable, powerful figure.
Right.
And of course she's a lower level figure, right? She's not, at the center of these things, but, look at her spirit cooking and stuff. It's dark stuff, but she's projecting this energy that I'm sensing, that she's nervous and she's scared, because it feels like that she now sees that the world sees her in a way that she wasn't able to maintain before. The illusion's gone.
Yep. Yeah. No, and see, these people, you have to think that they're in this club together, so they're always reinforcing each other. So they're all raping babies together, right? They like to give each other Nobel Prizes and medals and accolades, and they're fed by this stuff. They've been in a bubble. So I think it's going to be interesting as that bubble of theirs bursts, because they haven't really heard from us. Because we haven't known. So yeah, and this is all of them. We've been taught to revere and adore and see these people as like people see Bill Gates as a benefactor. Are you kidding me? He's into eugenics. He's into experimenting on children and people, or Fauci, or Oprah, or Klaus Schwab, or the Clintons, or the Pope, Pope John Paul II. I saw him in rituals, sacrificing children. So all these people, I mean, that's just a handful right there. All of them, we've been taught to look up to, and they're the worst people in this world. They're all part of this satanic cult. Okay. So when that mask falls, yeah, they are going to be scared of us. They live here with us, and there's billions of us, and there's only millions of them. So yeah, maybe they have mansions with bodyguards, but I would appeal to the bodyguards. Why are you protecting these people? Don't. If you cook for them or clean for them, don't. Again, they need us. We don't need them. And the only thing keeping their system going is us. That's the true power that we have. When we stop, they go down completely and very rapidly. And I would say this might be unpopular for some people, but for example, I don't vote because I don't consent to be ruled by something called government, which literally means mind control. Okay. That takes my money and tells me what I can and can't do, and abuses me with authority. So it's basically violence and thuggery legitimized. People if they have a uniform on, then they can attack you and beat you to a pulp. Like, I don't consent to that. Again, we have to consent. So I don't vote because I know that there's no good side to vote for. It's all part of. So my withdrawing that, what if no one voted? Then they don't have consent to governance anymore. Taxation is another form of legalized theft. What if everybody stopped paying taxes? They wouldn't be able to do anything about that. Okay, The IRS is not a government agency, folks. It's owned by one of these bloodline families called the Rothschilds. Okay, why do you think these people are so rich? They're parasitic. They're always enriching themselves off us. So it's time for a parasite cleanse.
Yeah, I've done them before, and I'd say now is time for a global parasite cleanse. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Max, before we wrap up, I want to bring your website up. It's unbroken.global. You've also got a Substack and a podcast, a show, other resources like that. I'll make sure that I put any additional links into the description below. I encourage people to check out unbroken.global. If you want to support Max, which I recommend it, you can donate there. You can get involved with what she's doing. She's got some groups that you can join there, some private groups there. And I just want to, again, thank you for having the courage to come out and talk about this. It's obvious that you've really worked hard on being able to sit down and have a conversation and talk about these things, which are difficult. I mean, to put it extremely lightly. But I thank you for doing what you're doing. And I hope that our discussion can reach a lot of people. And I hope to have you back on again and get into these things, because I think this is the discussion that needs to be had now. It's not who's going to win in the midterms and what's going to happen with this country and look what Israel's doing or look what China's doing. The discussion that we just had, I think, is a very, very important discussion. I hope more people start having.
Yeah, thank you. So I do seminars. So I have some that people can purchase on the website for very little and watch. So I've done one on what satanic ritual abuse is, exposing the Vatican. I've done seminars on mind control and on ideas of how to unplug from the matrix. I have members. So it's a great group of people. We meet on a Zoom once a month and we talk about, it's awake people. So if people need a place to go where you can talk about these things and not be considered a crazy conspiracy theorist, it's a space and a beautiful, and we need to make community. So there's that. So people can join and become a member. I write on Substack, and I also do reels on Instagram, Facebook, and now X. They're short reels, but I share information just to get people to think and take action. And I also am a psychologist, so I'm a therapist. I'm experienced, my expertise obviously is in trauma. And so with people who have really complicated trauma, like the kind I went through, I'm a good resource if if people need help in that way. And then I was banned from YouTube for a while, but I'm back on there. And then Rumble and BitChute and my website too. So I've interviewed all kinds of people, survivors, teachers, healers, whistleblowers. So if you want to learn more about how the system works, 90% of my interviews on there are free. A few are called premium and they're for members only. So if you want to become a member, then you can watch those. But I think it's important for us to educate ourselves and for us to do our inner work and our healing work. And I think the combination of that is really going to be what propels us forward. Oh, and I do a live once a month now, it's new, with Kimberly from Journey to New Earth. It's the last Sunday of every month, and it's, you can join. And we just talk about and dissect things, and people get to ask me questions. So if you want to join that, that's another, And I can give you links later that you can post for people. But thank you for wanting to interview me, for wanting to hear. It's dark and it's disturbing, but I'm really grateful to all the people out there who are supportive and who want to hear what survivors have been through, because if you listen to us, you're going to understand the bigger global situation much better. And it is hard and it is dark, but being ignorant and in denial is not going to save you, and we have an opportunity right now as they're disintegrating and losing control, and we're rising up to our full potential as human beings. We can change this world. We can create a heaven on earth.
I agree. Well, if I imagine what life would be like if the world wasn't run by a satanic death cult, it's like, oh, that would be a pretty nice place. So
Yeah.
I hope that we can get there. I think that we can. I think we can.
Yeah.
Yes.
We can.
Max, thank you again. I do look forward to next time.
All right. Thank you.
So if you made it this far, it means you got through the interview, which I congratulate you for sticking through. We kind of went through some dark places as you experienced, but there is hope. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that Max made a lot of really good and very important points towards the end about what we do about this. And this is really how I've structured my life, right? It's like live in a way that you cannot be controlled, live outside their system. Which is whether it's, you're doing a full-blown off-grid system, whether you're learning how to garden, you're building your own local community. I think it's more important now than ever for us to start building these parallel systems. Now, one way that I'm trying to help play my role in that with the reach and the audience that I have is I'm building an online community that's really kind of structured for building offline relationships. So it's called the ARC community. You probably heard me talking about it. We're only a couple weeks away from launching. Here's just a simple landing page for it. So just buildthearc.com. If you want to just put your name and your email in there so that way we can notify you as soon as the community opens up, just please do. So again, it's buildthearc.com. So it's a private community. It's really built around meeting people that see the world like you do. Not exactly, but some variety is the spice of life for us. But kind of meeting people that recognize the evil in this world and want to align with good people to fight back against the evil, to become more resilient. You might call it becoming a prepper, but I actually don't like that term very much because it's actually about just living in a way that we're independent. We have true sovereignty. And that actually comes down to a lot of our lifestyle decisions, how we live, growing our own food, taking responsibility, homeschooling our kids. And so the ARC is a place that people that think like me and probably you can come and meet and build relationships. We're going to have local chapters. You can go to local chapter meetings. Once those get kicked off, there's going to be training and information on there for all aspects of preparedness. There's even a prayer request group in there. So if you're having a struggle and you want to get some support, here's where you can do it. So to add your name and your email to the waiting list for that, right now, actually, I think we're approaching 9,000 people on the waiting list for this community. So I think it's going to be very popular. But if you want to join that list, just go to buildthearc.com. All right. Thank you. I'll see you next time.
Hello, everyone. Amanda Grace here. So something happened in the beginning weeks of February 2026 out of California that not only is tied to prophecy, but has a direct biblical tie. So what happened was a single tip triggered a massive California human trafficking bust with more than 600 arrests. Operation Reclaim and Rebuild rescued nearly 20 children and uncovered residential brothels across suburban neighborhoods. A single tip about a quiet suburban neighborhood in California exploded into a massive human trafficking takedown that rescued nearly 20 children, uncovered residential brothels, and netted more than 600 arrests statewide. Among the total arrests was 611. Now remember that number for a moment. Word of the Lord, August 25th, 2025 says, "For says the Lord, I have positioned the army of the Lord, the warring ranks and divisions in areas of your nation for what is about to be overturned. Washington, D.C., Chicago, Denver, California, New York, Maryland, Texas, Arizona, says the Lord. These events are imminent, says the Lord. The implosions from within are imminent, says the Lord. The greatest scandals of the decade are set to be exposed in this time, says the Lord. Fraud at the highest levels. Laundering at the highest levels, trafficking, says the Lord. The largest trafficking scheme to ever be caught and exposed is on the cusp of coming to light. I, the Lord, am leading those involved that have been diligently working for over a decade on such cases. Now, having to do with this as well, 611 total arrests. 611 is no accident. It ties directly back to the wickedness mentioned in the earth in the book of Genesis. In fact, Genesis chapter 6, verses 6:11 says, "The population of the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the land was filled with violence." That is a direct tie from Genesis 6:11 to the 611 arrests in this case. So continue to be watchmen, be in the Word of God every single day. Keep the faith.